Well, I'm giving a talk tonight for Napa Valley Insight. So, and I was thinking about what are the like traditional kind of Buddhist related themes that have to do with this time, because I haven't really intentionally kind of turned to that topic in some ways because it almost seems like a cliche, like maybe it's obvious, but I sort of try to force myself to go through that. And obviously, impermanence is, there. And the daily recollection that I am of the nature to age, to sicken, and to die. So this is inevitable, right? What's happening? It's not some aberration. It's natural. And then interconnection. This is that our bodies are interconnected, right? You think we think of ourselves as separate, but we're not separate. When we breathe out what's in our body, and if it's a disease and someone else breathes it in, they're just breathing in the thing that we breathed out, and so there's no separation, and that's probably why America is in such a crisis, because we are like the most individualistic society in the world, and a disease like this is not individual. It's just universal. It's just everywhere. So I guess for me, like what's comforting about that, I guess all of that is it makes it easier to accept like this is natural and this is how things work, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. Is that possible for us to even think that right now there's nothing wrong? Everything is the way it's meant to be. I guess, as humans, we again sort of think of ourselves as this separate species, and hardly even think of ourselves as a species, because that would mean that we were animals, and we don't, we think of ourselves almost as these like robots or something that are just like running the world and separate from the world, and we can do whatever we want. We'll just dig shit up or blow shit up and build stuff and just make it the way we want it to be. And this is a very humbling time when we realize like we've got no control. We're just not, we're not above it all. We are part of it, and we can keep running from it, but you can run, but you can't hide. Ah, happy times. So now, just for you to know, like Angela records these, and she does this thing where she like makes these different versions that are like with prelude, without prelude. And so sometimes I go and I listen to the prelude, or she gives me suggestions like, that was a really good, oh, that was a really bad prelude. Don't leave that on there. So I think if you could pick this one up where it started to get like spiritual sounding, and after the part where it's like, we're all going to die, that would be better. It'll seem like it's totally together. Kevin Griffin, man, he's so spiritual. All right, and I will say, just like I'm just being able to just say, I'm Kevin, I'm an alcoholic, is one of the most freeing things there is. It just like relieves me of it kind of relieves me of the bondage of self, it relieves me of the bondage of being somebody, just being somebody special, supposed to, whatever, fix somebody. So if we meditate, maybe we'll feel better. I already did meditate. I know it's hard to believe, but I did. Never mind. Okay, get it together, people. Assume the posture, your meditation posture, whatever that might be. And I'll tell you, one of my uh, healing practices when I meditate, and this started when I was writing my book, Living Kindness, is just to say love, love, love to myself. There's not much to it. I put that as in the front of that book. I just said, put quotes, love, 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 unquote, the Beatles. So uh, I don't know, sometimes it's too complicated for me to start meta phrases and all that, but love, love, love just kind of is like a breath into my body, into my heart. So letting your eyes close or just lower your gaze and coming into your body. And breathing, knowing you are breathing. And see what happens if you just say that mantra to yourself as you breathe. Love, love, love. Or letting the body soften. Letting energy settle. Feeling the stillness of the body. As we sit still, we can still feel all the energy of life coursing through us. The nervous system awake and aware throughout the body, sensing, feeling, perceiving. The Buddha talks about 6 senses, including the mind as a sense, and our practices based on bringing awareness to the perceptions and experiences through those senses. The sense of touch, what we call touch, it goes beyond the idea of the body having contact with something, touching something. It actually includes the whole internal experience of sensation through the body, which might be internal or external. As we tune into these subtle sensations, again, the Buddha suggests a way of categorizing them as elements: earth, air, fire, water. But this doesn't seem to capture much of the felt experience of the body, which is why we wind up using this somewhat vague term, energy. And energy is applied to this experience or description of this experience because there's a sense of movement, a kind of there are sensations of tingling and feelings of flow. Really, we don't have language exactly for this. And in fact, the practice of mindfulness doesn't require language, doesn't require us to put a name on the felt experience. Rather, it encourages us to pay close attention, to be with. Mindfulness of breath gives us a more specific sensation to pay attention to. We can wrap the mind around the breath and get absorbed in those sensations. If that becomes difficult or uncomfortable, we can open up to this broader experience of the body as energy, as a flow of energetic experiences. Where does the mind habitually go when cut adrift? Do you tend to go towards pleasant fantasy or more aversive or negative fears? Do you drift into the past, the future? Do you start calculating, reciting? Seeing these habits of mind give us insight into ourselves. When we bring a questioning, skeptical attitude towards these thoughts, can help us to break free of the belief systems we carry around through which we view the world, the limiting ideas, the unhelpful ways of looking at ourselves and our lives. Start to see that these are just thoughts. They are not truths. Okay. Oh, looks like a few more people joined us. Morning, everybody, or good day, maybe I should say. Since I don't know what time it is where you are. I see a bunch of California people, though. So we're on the last section of step 3 in One Breath at a Time. For those who are new to this, we are reading through my book from 2004, One Breath at a Time, Buddhism and the 12 Steps. So step 3 has been a journey, as it always is. And this section is called Too Much Faith. So it's there are these 3 sections to close the chapter: balancing faith and wisdom, too much wisdom and too much faith. And I guess was Walt covered the balancing faith and wisdom part. But the point of this is that we need these 2 elements in our spiritual practice, but that they need to be in balance in a skillful way. So I just read a great simile, apparently from the Buddha. I read it in a book from Ayakema. She said the Buddha says that faith is like a blind giant, and wisdom is like a clear-eyed cripple. And that so that faith carries wisdom on its shoulders, but wisdom guides faith. It's a really, really great image and really captures it, right? That faith is very powerful, but if it's blind, it can really get you into trouble. And also it's interesting, the implication that wisdom doesn't have much power without faith, and I think that's maybe the most surprising thing about this analogy, because I think that we kind of think of wisdom as like, oh, you're so wise, and that sort of is innately powerful. So anyway, I'll tell you about this, talk about this part of the book, and I'll read a little bit of it. But again, I know that some of you have read this book, and even some of you have read it probably don't remember all the elements of it. And as I've done in a lot of my writing, I use my own life experience to kind of build teachings out of. And this one was particularly kind of key to my spiritual growth. I was very kind of wide-eyed, a spiritual seeker in my early days, which is, not unusual. The first stage of faith is called bright faith, and it's just kind of like just really excited, but there's not a lot of wisdom with it. And so, I started meditating, doing TM at 28, and then at a certain point, like I got into Buddhism at 30, and at that point I started was in a community of spiritual seekers, and mostly in LA and some in Boston, kind of going between the two. And I would kind of seek out every teacher that came through town and go to see different Tibetans and different Hindu teachers, and kind of just soaking up teachings, and very excited. And then getting really into retreats, and all of this in the context of not being sober, and all the implications of that. Not just that I was drinking and using, because as I got into this spiritual search, drugs and alcohol became less, a part of what was happening for me. They were still there, and I was still binging from time to time on alcohol and still doing drugs, but they were a little less influential. But the thing was that I wasn't at all, there was this spiritual immaturity and really delusion that I see as very much tied up with addiction, which is this delusion that I'm going to find this otherworldly way to transcend all my problems. And this is not unusual for addicts and alcoholics. You know, over the years, I've run into a lot of people who, even before they got sober, pursued spiritual teachings in this sort of misguided way, and I think that's kind of the personality that falls into cults, and that's kind of the story in this section of the book, that because as will happen with an addict, you know, I overextended myself. I finally went on this 3-month retreat, and it was powerful, and I got really good at meditating, but my life was just a wreck. You know, my girlfriend broke up with me. She was on that retreat, and you know, and I didn't have a job, and I didn't have a place to live, and you know, but because it kind of, I had bet my whole life on this one roll of the dice that I was going to go on this retreat and everything was going to get solved, right? Like meditating was going to get me a job. Like what was, you know, or was going to make me a rock star was really that was the real like dream, you know, the absurdity of it really. After that, it took me 6 months just to rebuild my life, to get a job, a place to live, you know, get my life sorted out. And then I'm working in this bookstore in Boston, and in walks this guy who calls himself Ananda, who says, "Oh, do you want to get enlightened? Follow me." And because I was kind of disillusioned, like, oh, the problem is Buddhism didn't fix me, you know, the logic of the addict, right? It's like, no, like you're making bad decisions all along here. You're not like approaching life in any kind of a sensible way. You're looking for this quick fix. So so after this painful rebuilding of my life, I throw it all away literally in a day. I mean, it took me a couple of weeks of hanging out with this guy before one day I just like left town, left my job, left the band I was in, left the apartment I was in, you know, sleeping bag, backpack, acoustic guitar, I'm on the road, and wind up like traveling around with him, hitchhiking around with him. He had no money. He was homeless. We were living on faith. Yeah. So, you know, it just really is such an example of how it was really this blind giant is a great way to imagine it. I'm just stumbling around, like it was powerful, right? It was very powerful because it was like driving my decision making, but there was no wisdom in it. There was no broader view. So I'll read a little bit of this section. Some of it I really can't stand to read some of it aloud. But we'll sort of get past it. It says, when I met Ananda, I was advanced in my meditation practice, but stunted in my emotional growth. I wanted to let go of self before I really had a self. The irony of spiritual practice is that before you can let go of ego, you need to have a healthy ego. Ananda didn't exactly run a cult. He wasn't accumulating money or power. But in some ways, that's what the experience was like. What draws you to a cult is the feeling that you're going to be fulfilled, completed by joining. When you join a cult, it's because you sense something lacking in yourself and you want someone else to fix it. There's a weakness of personality that is drawn to the strength of the cult leader. And it's all done in the guise of spiritual growth. Quote, love, devotion, and surrender, which that was the name of an album by Carlos Santana and John McLaughlin. So, and because they were devotees of a Hindu guru back in the 70s. What complicates the issue is that this kind of surrender can be authentic and can be an authentic and powerful spiritual path for someone who has the maturity to surrender out of true devotion and renunciation rather than out of personal frailty. So there I'm kind of talking about, if you have, it's powerful if you have the crippled wisdom, the wisdom on your shoulders. So we have to be careful that when we turn our will and our life over to the care of God or a teacher or Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, or a teaching, that we aren't doing it out of a need to be fixed, that we do it out of a sincere and healthy opening of the heart, a sense of connection that enriches our life and doesn't deplete it. The headlong dive into a relationship with a teacher or group is another particularly alcoholic behavior. Giving away all your possessions, cutting off relations with friends and family, quitting work, and giving up your home is extreme behavior. And extreme behavior is what addictive people do. Not just alcoholics and addicts, but people afflicted by the scars and traumas of a painful childhood or abusive relationships. As we seek balance in our meditation practice, as well as in our lives in recovery, one of the things we have to look out for is this tendency toward extremes. This doesn't mean that we might not have a calling for the monastic life or for a very intense spiritual practice, but it does mean that we should move into these decisions very carefully, consulting with those around us, with friends, therapists, teachers, family. We should take our time. Ananda wanted me to decide now. I described this like, talking about magical thinking is like, okay, write down, trying to decide whether I should quit my job, quit my band, leave my apartment and hit the road with this guy. It's like, we go down to the Charles River. He says, write on 2 pieces of paper, stay on 1 piece of paper, go on the other. And then hold the paper up here and feel the energy. And then the one that's lightest is the one you should do. So, okay, this feels lighter, whatever that means. I open it up, go. Okay, we're going. Very sensible. Ay. So real life decisions take time. And when people are pressuring us to make up our minds, there's often some agenda behind that. In fact, many of our decisions in regard to our spiritual life don't even have to be decisions. If we practice sincerely, things will unfold naturally. It's one of the things that I tell like newcomers and people who are, kind of feeling pressured to make a decision. The first thing I ask them is, do you have to decide now? Like, could you wait? Like, because what happens when we wait, there's always more information, right? I don't know. Anyway, balancing wisdom and faith means keeping an open heart and an open mind, not closing ourselves off from the unknown, from possibilities yet unexplored, and not seeking quick fixes or supernatural solutions to our problems. Life is a mystery, the mind an enigma, the possibilities for spiritual growth endless, if only we are willing to explore. As human beings, we have amazing abilities to think, to feel, and to experience wonder. Step 3 sets us firmly on the path of freedom, connecting us to the great mysteries of life and the heart. Our job is to keep opening to the mystery with joy, gratitude, and bright attention. Nice. Um, I hate to burst bubbles. Well, I guess I do like to burst bubbles. I kind of am a bubble burster. And I'm just thinking about like that's a really nice like last paragraph. Go and pick up any of your random spiritual books and read the last paragraph in the chapters. You'll find there's like a last paragraph style that, I mean, I instinctively did it because I'm a writer, so I could have the instinct to do it. But it's one of those funny things. It's always like leave you on that high note, that inspirational. Sorry, I'm really not. There's probably some other teacher that's doing a free online class right now. Maybe you should Google something. So, folks, speak up. We have time, and I felt like I was talking for a long time, but it was only like 15 minutes. Anyway, we have some time. So questions, thoughts, corrections, comments. I'm curious if any of you were ever in a cult. Joanne, tell us about it. Come on, I saw you raise your hand. Unmute yourself.
Oh gosh, I just related to everything you said, and I never hear that said. So thank you. And I don't think about it, and I don't talk about it. But that whole thing of turning my will at such a young age over to something,
Yeah.
I feel to this day really robbed
Yeah. So you
of
were,
a certain level of maturity.
are you willing to share a little bit more about what that was? Or you don't have to.
Um, no, maybe somebody else.
Okay. Thank you, though. Yeah. Shambo, I see you've got your hand up on the
Yeah,
up machine.
yeah, your story and mine really tend to kind of overlap. The first great teacher in my life was an alcoholic charlatan,
Uh-huh.
but he managed to plant a seed, and I'm also a survivor of an emotional and physical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that just kind of wound together. And after I graduated college, I found myself traveling around India for about a year with a rogue Swami,
Mm.
Homeless and garbage piles and dirt floors. And, but somehow I thought it would all just disappear, this addictive sort of tendency and these really deep wounds in my heart that just always, I kind of carried with me. And I'm about 7 weeks sober.
All right. Congratulations.
And thank you. And it seems that everything that I've done previous to this point is now clear, because it feels like the giant and the cripple are now kind of walking together.
Mm-hmm.
So right when you gave that analogy, I just connected with it immediately. So thank you for that. It's going to give me a really good seed to contemplate all day.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really glad I stumbled on that in a book by Aya Kema, who is, one of my favorite teachers. Book is called Visible Here and Now. It's based on the sutta from the Digha Nikaya called The Fruits of the Spiritual Life. It's a great sutta. Yeah. But that analogy isn't in that sutta. She pulls it out, and she doesn't make reference to what sutta it's in. I'm going to have to start looking for it. Other folks have something to share?
Kevin?
Yes.
It's Abigail.
Yes.
I'm curious as to your thoughts on the accusation and partially true accusation that AA can become a cult, is a cult, acts like a cult.
Well, I think it's lacking one major element of a cult, and that is a leader. So it's hard to see that. I mean, I've known nothing about cults except what any ordinary person would know. But it seems to me that a cult there. It seems like something about a cult is that there's some uh, agenda, some hidden agenda that somebody's benefiting from. Either, it's either power or money or sex, usually, or all three, often all three. Um, so, so that there's that side. Now, on the other side, in terms of the members, where it looks cultish, I think you might be pointing to is the sort of uh, rigid party line that where it's like, yeah, it's like, this is the way it is. This is the way all alcoholics are. This is what you have to do. If you don't do this, or if you don't say that, then you can't be part of it. And my experience is that varies tremendously from group to group. So again, it's lacking this sort of overarching authority to say, this is how it is. I think certain groups become more cult-like than others, but I don't think it's fair to say that AA operates as a cult. Just my opinion. Again, yeah. Yeah, I see a hand raised. Elizabeth, hi.
I'm Gail. I'm an alcoholic.
Hello.
Oh,
I had
Elizabeth.
hold on, Gail. Uh, uh, Elizabeth had her hand up, so I just called on her. So
Beg your pardon. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kevin, and apologies for coming in late. But I think I caught up with the reading. I don't know whether you've watched The Sinner with Bill Pullman. The last series, and I'm only referring to it. I mean, I'm not his agent, and I'm not advertising the movie by any means, but it really struck me, and I'll tell you why. It's because the central character, if you like, was sort of both the leader and a follower in his own little cult. And he had a little game that he would play with himself as to whether he should go ahead or move forward or move backwards or jump into jump to his death, or whether so-and-so should be killed now. And it was all based on a little paper game with arrows and colors and what have you. So what I wanted to say is that to him, it was perfectly normal. He didn't feel like, he was in a cult, obviously. It was perfectly normal. He just thought other people were mad. And so that's all I wanted to share, which is that I can totally relate to that how do we get into that little bubble, to the extent that we can't see beyond our own sort of way of thinking. And it's only us that is right. We are the ones who know the true meaning, and everybody else is crazy. I mean, can you comment on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it comes out of fear. It feels safe when you feel like you've got the answer. You've got the kind of a magic answer to everything. And it's what kind of fundamentalism is about as well.
Yeah.
That if we have an answer, because life is messy, right? Reality, truth is confusing and difficult to grasp. And so if somebody can come along and give us something absolute, it helps us if we are insecure. It helps us to feel secure and safe. And that's why vulnerable personalities, emotionally vulnerable personalities, are drawn to that, right? To something that gives you, okay, here it is. And And there is something about magic. I mean, we all love magic,
Oh,
that's why Harry Potter is so popular. I mean, I actually wrote a blog once about wands, about the idea of like, you know, that, we all kind of want to have this wand that can sort of do magical things. And, and I guess too that like, because the world it seems chaotic in a lot of ways and random. So like, why not have it be based on like some magical thinking, and sort of like it's a way of sort of sorting out the chaos of the world, right? Explaining the chaos. Oh, it's why conspiracy theories are so popular. But I mean, it's like for me, like the Buddha's emphasis on karma, cause and effect, just sort of straightens it all out. It's like, oh, right, everything just like is caused by something. Diseases, you know, pandemics, they all have a cause. It's not random. It's not a conspiracy. It's like there's just natural cause and effect. Sometimes I think that's too simple for people. People would rather have something magical.
oh. And you've got to believe in something.
I guess you do. I mean, even if you think that you don't believe in anything, you're
Yeah,
believing in something.
yeah.
You
Thank
know,
you.
like the atheist. I see that the members of the AA cult are rebelling against the idea that it's a it's a cult by trying to talk their way out of it. I'm just kidding. It's for those who are not reading the chat. And said the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So you don't have to swear allegiance to the cult leader. Uh, Someone else says AA is not organized enough to be a cult, as evidenced in the experience of most AA group business meetings. Smiley face. AA traditions keep AA from being a cult. Yes. So Gail, did you want to say something?
Yeah, first off, I want to thank you and just say that your books have reading your books, both by myself and in a book study, have changed my life forever, and for that I am eternally grateful. I had a experience it would be a cult, although I don't believe they would call that. That was I've been a seeker my life too, and in 1977, about that, I was living in Baltimore and found a yoga group with this yoga group, and eventually made a trip to Los Angeles and stayed in an ashram. And we went out on a 10-day silent retreat in the desert. I don't know if it was Arizona or New Mexico, but somewhere. And I came back, and it wasn't too long after that I discovered they had rules about which people are okay, which people are acceptable, which people are lovable, and which people aren't. And I was in that category that I wasn't. I wasn't okay, and I wasn't accepted. And that was simply because of my sexual orientation. And I have found that's true in almost all organized religions. And so I have been, for me, just that one, it's a litmus test of the quality of, I think, of a belief, a litmus test. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
What's the litmus test? Whether it's open to
the attitude towards those of a different sexual orientation.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a common one, isn't it? A common kind of bias that shows up.
But thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of interesting I like hearing these kind of stories and just kind of pulling this out as because recovery programs are focused on pretty, especially AA and NA, strictly on the addiction. Sometimes we don't get to see some of the other sort of subcategories of addicts and sort of look at some of these other elements of addiction. So it's interesting to see how and to see, for me, it's interesting to see like how many people share that. Like, you know, I thought I was unique, ha ha ha, not surprising, um, and it was, and I'd been in recovery for a pretty long time before. I'd been sober for a long time before I started to really encounter other people who had similar stories. You know, there's that book by Christina Groff called "The Thirst for Wholeness," and I quote that in the beginning of A Burning Desire. Maybe I have that here. Yes, I do. So she says, I believe that this fervent thirst for wholeness, as well as the discomfort with it, is the underlying impulse behind addictions. And she, that's in her book is about people who are using, whose alcoholism, and she's a recovering alcoholic, who are trying, who are kind of trying to use alcohol, or that it's an expression of some spiritual longing. And of course, we see that more with psychedelics and other drugs. I know I didn't have great experiences with psychedelics, but marijuana for me was definitely had a spiritual component to it. That I remember, you know, my early days of getting high, of just kind of like the world suddenly seeming very alive, and you know, listening to music, of course, but even just being outside, or like my visual sense just seemed so heightened at first. You know, you get used to it because you're stoned all the time, but at first it's kind of, there's this spiritual element to it, and so, you know, that's what Bill Wilson is talking about, and I guess it's Carl Jung. You guys, some of you maybe know, are better with this history stuff, but the thing about comparing spirits with spiritus, that I think Jung said that there was this element of this spiritual longing in our alcoholism. And I guess, you know, one of the things that I like about that is that it's not such a harsh judgment on the fact that you're an alcoholic. You know, like a lot of our stories around being addicts are really kind of bleak and negative, and about, you know, just being drunks, or you know, acting really harmfully, and being foolish. But to see that it's like giving ourselves a little bit of a break, to see that, you know, that we were acting out of this wound that we were trying to heal, or this longing for something transcendent, and so that we don't always have this negative view of ourselves as addicts. For me, that's really important, that we kind of come out of that model of ourselves as these damaged individuals, and people whose addiction was purely a selfish action, and was only destructive. But there we go. So Carl Jung, in his letter to Bill, wrote about alcoholics seeking spirit and finding spirit with small s. Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Great. Well, thanks, you guys, for getting me through Tuesday morning. Yeah, if you could give me suggestions for what, actually, by talking to you, I got more clarity about what I might talk about tonight. But as I said, if you want to seek out the Napa Valley Insight Meditation Group, I'll be with them tonight from 7 to 8:30. Oh, that's a good. Okay. Joni, thank you. Thanks for becoming a cult leader. Yes. Oh, for not becoming a cult leader. Darn. I'm not a cult leader. Darn. Jeez. Are people reading the chat? Because I think it's worth seeing. Having been involved with Recovery Dharma, I like the idea of also dealing with process addictions along with intoxicants, just freeing ourselves from any repetitive and habitual behavior. Yes, and I think, when we're talking about this kind of culty thing and that longing, clearly, the process addictions are, I think that's expressed more clearly with those, because there isn't sort of the obvious thing of like you're addicted to a drug or alcohol. Those substance addictions sort of can dominate our view of what our disease is or what our condition is, and distract us from the subtler things that are really going on. And I think to heal and to really recover, we have to deal with those subtler things, because there are people who get into cults who are sober. I mean, actually, Noah Levine's story in Dharma Punks is very similar to that, where his sponsor wound up being kind of a cult leader. And if you know the Pacific Group in LA, if you want to talk about cult, AA as a cult, that's they have some of the qualities of a cult in terms of rigidity of behavior and having a leader who defines the rules. But still there's no real exploitation going on. Okay, you guys, we don't want to run late because the place where I am, they might kick me out. The next group is going to be coming in. So, all right, Friday night we'll do one of our inter-step meetings, some sharing and some talk about meditation and stuff before we get into step 4, which is going to be a lot of fun. Step 4, I've outlined it, and it's going to be a lot of work. We might get through it by Christmas. Okay. Blessings. Wear a mask. I know you all do because you're wise. Remind everybody to wear masks. Vote. Take care.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
So good to see everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.